So this week I sat down to write a video about the meaning of the left after being struck by all the recent online debate about what is and isn't on the left. I thought this would be pretty simple, but once I started working on the video and talking to some of the folks I work with, we realized that the left means very different things depending on who says it. For example, recently ContraPoints used both the left and the online left in her statement on Gaza to accuse them of either facilitating anti-Semitism or being unrealistic about the possibility of getting Israel to stop doing genocide or something like that. Lots of people have talked about this. You don't need to take from me. For the liberal architects of abundance, the left seems to mean podcasters or cranky academics who think that their ideas don't hold up to scrutiny. And of course, there is a host of YouTube videos that claim to speak about some amorphous entity that is called the online left. And for others, of course, the left just means anyone who is anti-Trump, a group that includes both neoliberals and anti-fascists. Words do mean things, so I still wanted to make this video about the history and philosophy of the thing called the left, as I think understanding that history can better inform this general confusion. And in thinking through this topic alongside recently reading the work of theorist Anna Kornbluh, I think that the confusion about what is and isn't the left actually reveals a much deeper problem about what happens when our politics are something that we primarily discuss via social media platforms. I'll say more about this later, but it seems that when we don't utilize leftist political organizations or leftist philosophies to better understand contemporary debates, we risk fueling the content machine more than we are fueling a larger leftist political project. Hey, just a heads up, this is going to be a more casual one. It's just us having a conversation, so grab a beverage. Join me. Okay, so let's start with the origin of the term the left. Now, it comes from the French Revolution, as those who supported the revolution sat on the left side of the assembly. And the French Revolution forever shifted our conceptions of leftist politics and philosophy. It represented a radical shift away from a politics centered around monarchy and sovereignty, and towards a project that viewed the people themselves as their own sovereign power. The most political philosophy 101 version of this shift is that you had someone like Thomas Hobbes, right? And he thought that politics only worked when there was a sovereign leader in charge to keep all of us from killing each other, because in our natural state, humans are just power-hungry freaks. And the price of this safety was sacrificing our own freedom and will and then transferring them to a sovereign power. In opposition to this, you get someone like Jean-Jacques Rousseau, who thought that in our state of nature, humans were actually good and chill. It's society that makes us into a bunch of little assholes. Now, rather than an all-powerful sovereign, Rousseau viewed the government as the representative of the will of the people. So rather than sacrificing freedom so that the government or that a sovereign has power, we sacrifice our individual will for the sake of the collective will. And while Rousseau himself was not calling for violent revolution, his ideas helped shape the political philosophy that did fuel the French Revolution. We see this in the three words that characterized the project of the French Revolution: liberty, equality, and fraternity. Now, what made the French Revolution a leftist political project is that it didn't seek to modify a pre-existing political system. It aimed to destroy that which existed for the sake of something new. The goal wasn't to reform a broken system, but to burn the whole damn thing to the ground. And this is in opposition to a right-wing position, which in the case of the French Revolution meant those who supported a monarchy. In the case of modern conservative politics, according to Corey Robin, means preserving existing hierarchies in the face of the expansion of democracy. In both of these cases, to be on the right is to be a counter-revolutionary. So if the left wants to expand freedom and human self-determination, the right strives for order and control to preserve the status quo. We can further understand the meaning of the left via the work of Polish philosopher and historian Leszek Kołakowski. Yes, I know this guy was later in life a critic of Marxism. Okay, you don't gotta fact check me. I know a few things. According to Kołakowski, the left is a movement of negation toward the existing world. For this very reason, it is, as we have seen, a constructive force. It is simply a quest for change. And Kołakowski notes that a utopian spirit motivates this desire for negation, writing that, thus the left is defined by its negation. But not only by this, it is also defined by the direction of this negation. In fact, by the nature of its utopia. In opposition to this, he calls the essence of the right the affirmation of existing conditions. So the politics, and as I'm going to talk about in a second, the philosophy that traces its lineage to the French Revolution aims at the radical expansion of human freedom and liberty and the destruction of existing systems which oppress this freedom. This is why institutions that seek to reaffirm what already exists or to reform existing systems of power are always going to be on the right. And that includes the Democratic Party and a number of liberal nonprofit organizations that might advocate for things that are good and cool. Now, on the other hand, groups historically aligned with the labor movement, socialist and communist politics, anti-colonial movements, and the like, are connected to that revolutionary leftist history as they seek the negation of currently existing systems and the creation of new systems that reaffirm human freedom, equality, and self-determination. You know, shout out to the Black Panthers, shout out the Zapatistas, shout out your favorite revolutionary movement in the comments. So if you and your friends wanted to do leftist politics, well, a good step is getting involved in an existing political organization grounded in these types of shared political principles. It's also why referring to those organizations and those involved in them as the left actually makes sense. Now, I'm going to say more about this in the final section of this video, but these sorts of organizations are necessary to help us make sense of our own political will and desires, and to figure out how to both think and act more strategically towards our shared political goals. In other terms, they help to mediate our political will so that we're participating in projects that have a clear aim. If political parties, organizations, and unions are one version of the actually existing left, the other side is leftist philosophy, which also traces its roots to the French Revolution, which precipitated radical shifts in European philosophy and gave us a lot of our favorite contemporary left-wing thinkers. Okay, so I'm going to summarize a bunch of things very quickly right here, so apologies to any scholars of 19th century European political philosophy who feel let down. But if any of those people are watching this, hey, what's up? Share some of your favorite readings with us. But here's a bullet point summary of how we got from the French Revolution to modern leftist philosophy. Now, arguably the most important figure in modern European philosophy, Immanuel Kant, was supportive of the ideas of the French Revolution, while also being against the idea of revolution. You know, to put it differently, he wanted revolution in thought, but not in these streets. And he was basically a cop at the political level, but at the level of thought, he was really into the idea of freedom that's represented by the revolution. You know, Kant thinks that human thought is capable of way more than we previously realized. And for him, freedom enables the individual to assert their own autonomy, which is based in the authority of reason available to all. You know, he thinks that using your own understanding for yourself is necessary for truly realizing freedom as an adult. Now, in the wake of Kant, we get the German idealist, most notably Hegel. Hegel thought that the revolution represented something important in human history and thought. You know, Hegel is like less of a cop than Kant, but he still wasn't super based. And for Hegel, the French Revolution is a moment of dialectical contradiction, where the old world comes into conflict with the spirit of a new age, leading to an advancement in history, which, to be clear, is good. Jumping ahead a bit, Marx picks up Hegel's dialectic, he puts it down, he flips it, and he reverses it so that rather than ideas shaping history, history shapes our modes of thought. It's a shift from idealism to materialism. And in many ways, to be leftist after Marx means to be a materialist and to locate political conflict and contradiction in historical and material conditions, you know, not just in the realm of ideas. While not every leftist thinker takes this stance, for many, the dialectic you get via Hegel and Marx is essential for doing left-wing philosophy. Now, much of the radical political philosophy in the 20th century further reckons with Marx, constructively and critically, whether that's the Frankfurt School of Critical Theory, you get someone like Frantz Fanon's radical post-colonial thought, Jean-Paul Sartre's attempt to think Marxism and existentialism at the same time, a whole host of feminist and queer and anti-colonial indigenous thinkers, all using this type of thinking to push things forward. Now, if the French Revolution was the big bang of leftist philosophy, then the events of May 68 in Paris added some fuel to that fire and gave us the work of folks like Etienne Balibar, Jacques Rancière, and Alain Badiou. This same lineage eventually gets us to very popular non-French thinkers like Slavoj Žižek and Frederick Jameson. Also, quick note, I'm running a Frederick Jameson reading group over on my Patreon. I'm doing hour-and-a-half seminars every other week. We are reading text together, talking about the ideas. It's something that's accessible, I think, whether or not you have a background in reading theory. So if that sounds interesting to you, there's a link to my Patreon in the description. It's available at every level. So check it out if you want. It's been very fun thus far. Now, the important thing here isn't that all of these figures think the exact same things, but that they share a tradition of influence and critique, ultimately aiming at a similar political future. Now, this is important as when we're doing the intellectual work of the left, we can participate in this tradition of thought rather than reinventing the wheel, which often ends badly anyways. I previously mentioned Kołakowski's idea that the left is defined by the nature of its utopia, and often its philosophy that can help give us the glimpse of utopian possibility that can then orient our thought in the present. And this all brings us back to our current moment, when the left and the online left feel completely disconnected from much of this historical and intellectual context. To take the ContraPoint statement, for example, she doesn't refer to any political organizations or groups as the left. The closest that she gets to is to name the leftist pro-Palestinian movement, which she explicitly critiques for an opposition to Zionism, I think. And she doesn't mention any specific ideologies at play leading to the type of bad leftism that she describes. Now, I bring all of this up to say that so often when we're talking about the left or the online left or leftist content, what's being described is something that's more like a cultural brand than something recognizable as working within the history of the term. While the term sometimes simply becomes anyone to the left of me who I happen not to like, such that even ContraPoints has been identified as on the left by other more right-wing detractors, ultimately what being on the left tends to mean in this context is participating in a particular form of cultural aesthetics associated with a specific group of podcast or YouTube channels or meme accounts. I recently spoke with literary theorist Anna Kornbluh about her book Immediacy, and I think her ideas can help us make some sense of the issues with how we think about what it means to be on the left, especially in a digital context. Now, according to Kornbluh, our culture is dominated by a sense of immediacy, meaning that cultural products like social media posts and YouTube videos manifest visceral and immediate emotional responses from us without leaving any space for critique or a more complex understanding. In more technical terms, and we'll get into this, there's no space for mediation. Now, mediation, unlike immediacy, is the social activity by which we can make sense of the world and create meaning. It's a way of understanding the complex relations between things and ideas. And it can also help avoid falling into the trap of emotionally fueled hot takes and reactions. Now, if we apply Kornbluh's analysis to this discussion of the left, it seems like lots of debates around what is leftist is just about the reactions or affects immediately produced by various cultural objects. So when it comes to being an online leftist, this might be one who reacts in the right way to the right posts and videos and utilizes the correct memes and maybe even occasionally leaves the house to show up to the right protests, making some content while they're there. But all of this is done without either A, mediating these ideas and activities through actually existing leftist political organizations, or B, the mediation of concepts or ideas from leftist political philosophy to help us properly analyze the situation. In other words, our political identities, especially in a digital context, are replicating this type of immediacy, one that Kornbluh associates with what she calls too late capitalism. Now, while the book doesn't focus primarily on political theory, in an interview, Kornbluh makes clear that the two are related. In it, she says, nonetheless, the book absolutely tries to indicate that the style of immediacy governs the tactical and ideological preferences for horizontalism, localism, anarcho-spontaneity, anti-unionism, and the lack of disciplined organization on the left. The latter is often replaced by cults of charisma, virulent opinionism, and anti-institutionalism. All of these trends can be observed on the political left and right. Now, this style of political immediacy, one that I think is very much exemplified in online political discourse, leads to immediate actions and reactions, usually without the mediation of political organizations or philosophies. As Kornbluh notes, rather than disciplined leftist organizations, we focus on charisma, virulent opinionism, and anti-institutionalism. And against this type of immediate leftism, I think we need to make sure we're embracing the left as a particular political and philosophical orientation with a clear set of shared principles. And we need to utilize leftist organizations and thinkers to help us mediate our understanding of and response to the political and social crises that we're currently experiencing. In this way, leftist organizations can help us more strategically engage in collective political action, and leftist political philosophies can help us to step back from the compulsive reactivity of the internet to more carefully understand the world and ourselves. Now, to be clear here, as someone who sees themselves as being, on the left and who also creates content on this platform, I think many of the folks who are considered to be the online left absolutely rule and are making things that go a really long way in helping folks feel less alienated and insane. Thank you for doing it. We salute you. I just worry that internet culture has the insidious effect of leading us to conflate individual critique with structural critique. I know that I have definitely fallen into that trap before. One way we can think of it, and I want to shout out the homies Lux and Dave for helping me on this point, is that discipline and ideological coherence are often sacrificed when so much time is spent policing the leftism of various individuals. Because so many folks in the online left community agree about 90, 95% of things, publicly squabbling over the remaining 5 or 10% can sometimes be counterproductive. This is another instance where the mediation of an organization can be helpful, as ideological debate can be useful in the context of a group of people organized around a specific political project. But when that debate spills into the creation of content that's ultimately just being monetized and reduplicated by algorithms, it's not getting us any closer to collective action or ideological coherence. So, to quote one of the greatest online leftists to ever do the thing, the late great Michael Brooks, let's remember to be ruthless with systems and kind to individuals. If you do want to hear more about Anna Kornbluh's work, check out my recent interview with her over on the Sideburns channel, and check out her book Immediacy, published by our friends over at Verso. If you like the idea of digging into leftist philosophical ideas in more depth, consider signing up for my Patreon, where I recently started up a Frederick Jameson reading group, where we're doing seminar-style sessions breaking down the work of arguably the most important leftist academic that America has ever produced. Thanks for hanging out for this one. I wanted it to feel a little bit more casual and conversational. Hopefully it did. And finally, just a huge shout out to everyone for watching, and an extra special shout out to all of my patrons. Your support means so much. You're helping me build this channel out. You're helping me pay the people that work with me to make stuff that we believe in. So know that myself and a bunch of other folks really appreciate you. I'll catch you guys next time for a video about maybe my favorite book ever. Maybe. Come back and check that out.